Welcome back to another video lecture. This time we're talking about the 1990s, period I grew up in. And I got to say, was kind of a period of confusion. Reminds me a lot about my childhood. Okay, another story for another time. So why do I say that? Well, because the world was in confusion. The Soviet Union had just fallen and people really didn't know how things were going to go anymore between the United States and the rest of the world. Plus, on top of that, we were right after the Reagan period, and there was a real questioning of what we were going to go to. Was it going to be Reaganomics, or was it going to be back to Keynesianism? Well, in the middle of all this, we had President Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton kind of represented this return to sort of a youthful idealism. But then as the decade went on, a lot of things didn't go quite the way Bill Clinton wanted to, especially when it came to issues of poverty, when it came to issues of crime, and when it came to issues of his own personal relationships. However, at the same time, the 1990s were a huge boom when it came to economics, especially due to the development of the internet. So the 1990s in many ways was this period of confusion and transition into what was going to come next. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of context to the 1990s. Go back old school here. So back in the 1990s, the Soviet Union had fallen. There was no longer that bipolar world between the United States and the Soviet Union. Instead, there was a multipolar world with a ton of different countries vying for leadership, with the United States kind of at the head. In the midst of all of that was this new global order. And in that new global order was this desire for free trade. Now, in this free trade environment, they've ended up forming these regional agreements. The most famous under Bill Clinton was NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This was an agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico to have free trade in between the different countries, have a lot of trade going back and forth, lowering tariffs, and possibly even allowing a little bit more of migration back and forth between all those different countries. At the same time, in economics, there was still that huge debt left over from the Reagan era. At this point, $3 trillion. So in 1992, in comes a new youthful president, Bill Clinton, governor from Arkansas. And Bill Clinton promised that we were going to do something called the middle path. He didn't want to go back to Reaganism, but we weren't really going back to Keynesianism either. Instead, it was kind of going to be a mixture of the two. We were going to have free trade. We were going to have more open economics. He even claimed it was the end of big government.
The era of big government is over.
But at the same time, he said that there were certain government programs that were needed. Now, internationally, Margaret Thatcher, who used to be in charge of Britain, gave this acronym called TINA. Who was TINA? TINA was actually an acronym for there is no alternative. In other words, she was saying, can't do communism anymore. So because of that, we've got to go the route of capitalism. And the 1990s looked like capitalism with a few supports might actually be the way to go. Well, during the 1990s, we saw a huge boom in technology due to the personal computer, due to satellite technology, due to new types of cell phones and cellular technology. From there on out in the 1990s, things kept growing. Now, little did we know what the model was behind this. There was a new model economically. The model was for people to actually charge less than what it costs to make a product. How are businesses making any money off of that one? Well, because businesses figured they could take a hit when they were charging people, but that got more people to invest in the stock market. As long as the stock market went up, people made tons of profits. So like I said, Bill Clinton came into office with youthful excitement. The first thing he took on was trying to integrate the military when it came to homosexuality. In the end, he didn't win on that one, but he did establish a policy called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, this is a policy that's reviled today because it did a lot of damage for homosexuals. But at the same time, at that time, gay people couldn't serve at all. And so this was one step forward in the idea that at least gay people would be able to serve. But from there on out, there was a fight to try to make sure that they could serve openly. Now, the next big initiative he took over was a massive failure, and that was to try to create a national healthcare policy. He lost on that, and that allowed the Republicans to gain power in 1994 under a man named Newt Gingrich. And Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton basically went to war throughout the 1990s after that. Now, right after the 1996 election, when Bill Clinton took office, Newt Gingrich and many of his allies found something that they thought was pretty good. They basically said that Bill Clinton had had a sexual affair with one of his interns named Monica Lewinsky in the Oval Office, to which Bill Clinton said,
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Well, actually, he did. So what came up on this was a fight over whether or not Bill Clinton had lied when he was under a grand jury dealing with issues of sexual harassment back in Arkansas. Now, for Bill Clinton, this issue was really about the Republicans going after him on sexual politics. And Bill Clinton kind of fit into that role pretty well. Why? Well, Republicans have been claiming for some time that the 1960 generation, which Bill Clinton was a part of, lacked morality and integrity and character due to their sexual immorality back from the 1960s. Bill Clinton kind of fit into that pretty well during that time. And the more and more that came out about his personal character, the more and more it looked like the presidency was losing integrity. So because of that, the Republicans brought Bill Clinton up on impeachment accusations based upon him lying on issues of sexuality while in office. In the end, though, Bill Clinton won that fight. He was impeached, but when the trial was brought to the Senate, basically didn't go anywhere. And so because of that, Bill Clinton would finish off his time in office with an economic boom. However, in 2000, everything started changing. Remember that model that I told you about with the tech companies? Well, the tech bubble eventually burst. People lost their faith in the stock market and pulled their money out. And that basically caused a decent sized collapse within the stock market and a recession until 2002. Also, Al-Qaeda, a new transnational terrorist group, was arising in the Middle East. So what are our major takeaways from the 1990s? Well, first of all, the 1990s began with uncertainty, but a sense of youthful optimism. What they eventually turned to, as our second big takeaway, was this middle path of economics, free trade and open markets with some government supports. And by the end of the 1990s, there was definitely a lot of uncertainty centered around the rise of terrorism, the collapse of the economy, and a questioning of the American character. See you guys.